it's the Political Kid here, and today I'm going to be making a video on the brief history of the early US. You guys voted on this video, and I'm going to make it up to you, and hope you have fun. To help you understand what this video is going to be about, I'm going to explaining the political stances and what was going on in America during this early history, and also the geographic and geographic political situation that was happening out of the U.S. that changed U.S.'s course in history. So in 1776, obviously the revolution happened. There was a lot of what was seen as then radical ideas. However, one thing that would definitely divide the country from then and into the future was the issue of slavery. Initially, Thomas Jefferson wanted to issue a decree denouncing slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but because he feared that the southern states wouldn't join the Union because of this, he took it out of the clause. So it just became an issue that it was kicked further down the road with compromises that only alienated everybody. Actually, the first election that we had in American history was very weird and complicated, considering it was only the electors that voted in this election, and it was also kind of a ranked choicing system because each elector got to vote for two people, the president and the vice president. And what happened is that George Washington, the famous general from the Revolutionary War, won. Obviously, you pretty much know that. But what was contentious was the vice presidency, which John Adams did win, and then they went on to win re-election in 1792. One thing that we could take out of his presidency that was damaging to his legacy for a bit was the whiskey rebellion, since he raised taxes on people who bought whiskey, which really angered them, so they started a revolt, which personally made Washington have to go down there. But once Washington was down there, they stopped, and it would be repealed eventually. Basically, in the first contentious election that we had in American history, John Adams ran against Thomas Jefferson in an election which was considered very contentious. I mean, it was the first establishment of political parties, the Federalist with John Adams, and the Democratic Republicans with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson wanted a restrained government on the states, while the Federalists wanted a more control, a more controlled union. And John Adams barely won the election to Thomas Jefferson, giving him the term. But 4 years later, because of the economy not being so well, Thomas Jefferson won the rematch, and Thomas Jefferson also led on to win a second term in 1804. So now we're going to be talking about the era between Thomas Jefferson's time out of office and between the War of 1812 and also the era of good feelings. So in 1808 and 1812, James Madison won election easily because of Jefferson's popularity, the Louisiana Purchase, and the Federalists kind of being divided on a lot of issues. Now, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans focused on specific issues, including whether they should go to war with Britain and who they should trade with. The Democratic Republicans said they should trade with more French-leaning allies, while the Federalists said they should trade with British-leaning allies. But in the end, the Democratic Republicans went on top, and the War of 1812 was a war that gave the American population more patriotism, and after the war, the Federalists were even in more shambles. So once we get into the era of good feelings, we have James Monroe's very popular leaning stances because of the Democratic Republicans. And now that he was in office, the era of good feelings were in full effect, and it was going great. However, in 1824, it became a bigger issue, considering that John Quincy Adams, the Secretary of State, would run for president, since all the other, James Monroe was Secretary of State under James Madison, and he ran for president. So John Quincy Adams ran a campaign of getting that more northern vote to vote for him, while also making sure that he doesn't really care about the regular average man. While Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay try to persuade the other people while in the election. So this election was the most I could say the most contested, considering there was 4 candidates, and all of them got a considerable margin of the Electoral College, and it went to the House of Representatives, of which Henry Clay, who didn't get into the top 3, was the Speaker of the House, so he controlled a lot of persuasion within the House. And when John Quincy Adams said, "Hey, Henry Clay, if you persuade these House of Representatives to vote for me, I will make you my Secretary of State," and that's what happened. It was seen as a corrupt deal, and is really what made Andrew Jackson won the 1828 election, considering that it was a election about revenge. Now we're going to be talking about the era where it wasn't really that contested, because the Democratic Party was a strong party with Andrew Jackson leading the party, and he would win re-election in 1832. And because the newly formed Whig Party was very cracked and very dismembered in the 1836 election, they lost handily to Martin Van Buren. However, because of Van Buren's unpopularity and the Whigs being able to fight around one candidate, they were able to put William Henry Harrison, who was an experienced person within America, to win against Martin Van Buren in an incumbent race, which usually incumbent presidents during this time don't lose. Because the Whig Party's candidate for 1840 died only 30 days into his presidency, a person who actually kind of was a Democrat, who was John Tyler, would lead the country for the next 4 years and would be abandoned by both major political parties. And because of this, even though they had another experienced candidate, the Whigs would lose because they weren't able to get as much excitement as they were for the Democrats around James K. Polk. And the war on Mexico was very divided during the 1844 election. However, during the 1848 election, if you went out against the Mexican-American War, you had no chance of winning. So that's kind of why they chose a general, Zachary Taylor, to run against Lewis Cass, and that's kind of why they won in 1848, and they were able to energize the Whigs. Since the Whigs ran up another experienced candidate against a Democrat Northerner, the Democrats were really able to get a lot of Northerner support while also keeping their moderate on slave policies to keep the South, and that's kind of how they won the 1852 election, and also because the Whig Party was in shambles because of the slavery issue. In this time, the slavery issue would expand to make sure that if one side was very clear on what they're going to do, the other side would take a lot of action on it. So if the Southerner Democrats did something that upset the Northerner, what would be now Republicans, since the Whig Party would split, the Northerner Republicans would try to get back at them eventually, or at least try to get a compromise. In 1856, the Republican Party was still new. However, they did have a decent chance, since the incumbent president, Franklin Pierce, didn't run in 1856, but James Buchanan did. However, they weren't able to get a lot of support, and James Buchanan did win his home state of Pennsylvania, which was able to give him a good victory within the South and the North, and that's that is one of the last times that Democrats would be elected for a very long time. Slavery issue is going too far. For James Buchanan is too unpopular to run for re-election, where Southerner Democrats and Northerner Democrats can't get behind one candidate, where Northern Republicans are basically the only party that could get support from abolitionists, like full-blooded abolitionists, and there's even a party in the 1860 election that just focused on the Constitution, called the Constitution Union, headed by John Bell, who ran in it. It was a very divided election with John Bell and the Southern Democrat, challenger John C. Breckinridge, who was the vice president. And in the North, it was very clear that it was very divided on moderates and just like Northerners, like full-blooded abolitionists, with Stephen A. Douglas versus Abraham Lincoln. We all know that Abraham Lincoln won, and this is the start of the middle age America, and where the early age America dies. And we're gonna end it there, right before the Civil War starts. And I hope you all like this video. Maybe you're a little bit more educated. If you have any ideas for me, I might do a sequel on this, probably. But if you want more videos, go on the comments, like my video, subscribe to my video, go tell other channels about my videos. So I hope you have a good day. Goodbye.